All right, this is Steve Halleck of TikToking. As always, check out my website, ticktalking.com, and check me out on Instagram at Steve Halleck for the latest editions. Here today we have a freak, Diavolo, one of the few sort of big brand, if you could even call Ulysse Nardin big brand, but a real brand, not a little independent brand, but one of the few watches from a real brand that is super, super innovative and influential in the contemporary horology world. And so let's go through it. I'll talk a little bit about the original Freak and then the Freak Diavolo, which is the version that's here. So let's start with the history of it, I guess, where we have to talk about the original Freak. That was developed in, or first released at least, in 2000. And it's really still maybe one of the most, I don't know if technologically advanced is the right word, but at least innovative and horologically innovative pieces from a major brand that has come out in the last couple decades. And basically, it completely rethought what a watch could be, a mechanical watch, and how it could be constructed and made. And this Freak Diavolo is an evolution of the original Freak concept, and it kind of adds some cool things that are made possible by some new technologies. But the basic sort of technological challenge is the same in the Freak and the Freak Diavolo. And basically that comes down to a carousel, which is a tourbillon basically has the escapement and balance, the kind of time regulating system moving independently. And the carousel, which the Freak is kind of a carousel, kind of not, based on traditional definitions, but let's just call it the Freak carousel, right, is basically takes the entire movement and turns it around once every hour. And to do that, they basically made the minute hand the whole movement of the watch. So what you can see here is the minute hand, this whole thing, and those are all of the gears and everything of the watch other than the mainspring, okay? So I hope you're following with me. So the entire watch basically turns around once an hour, and it's geared to an hour hand, which is underneath here right now, so you can't see it, but actually, sorry, it's right there. So right now it's showing something like 8:17, right? Hour hand, minute hand. But the hour hand is just geared off the minute hand, and the minute hand is the whole movement of the watch minus the mainspring. So that's the important thing to know with the Freak, and that's the same with the original Freak and the Freak Diavolo. Okay, so now the main technical challenge was, okay, if we're gonna do that, how do we get the thing enough power? Because this is a lot of weight to be moving, and so they put what is, to my knowledge, the biggest mainspring in a wristwatch in the Freak and in the Freak Diavolo. And in order to do that, they basically put a mainspring around the entire back of the watch. Okay, so you can see it there through this window. And they've developed a system where you can see there's no crown on the watch, okay? So to wind the watch, you wind the entire back of the case. And that winds the mainspring. And through that window, you can see the spring get tighter and tighter. So that's kind of like a power reserve for you. And you know when it's completely wound. Sorry, this buckle keeps throwing off my autofocus here. All right, so you can see I'm winding it. It has an 8-day power reserve, which is very nice. And it's actually pretty nice to wind. It feels, there's no kind of gear feeling to it at all. It's just a smooth turning with obviously some resistance as you're putting in some real mechanical work here. But it's very, very nice and smooth, okay? So here you can see it says silicium escapement. Now, let's just clear up the word silicium. First of all, a lot of people think that that's some new crazy thing, whatever. Silicium is the same as silicon. It's the same material. Silicium is the European pronunciation. So sort of like they say aluminium versus aluminum. Same thing. So silicon or silicium, which I may use interchangeably here, is the material that we most know for computer chips, obviously. And it is really important, and was important to the original Freak. It is basically the key thing that makes the Freak work. And that is because it can be incredibly light and perfectly precision cut. And also, because it is so precise, doesn't need lubrication, or needs less lubrication, depending on who you talk to on it. But here you can see this silicon escape wheel here. It's bright kind of teal, green, bluey color, and it looks really cool, right? So that was a key technical thing that made these movements work. And you're transferring basically a huge amount of power from here up through into this minute hand movement, right? Now, the first Freaks were anchored to the glass. So if you look at one of the original Freaks, you'll see that there's like a pinion here that's actually anchored into the top sapphire glass. On the Diavolo, that doesn't happen, and the entire thing is floating. Now, when a piece is floating and that piece happens to be a tourbillon, they call it a flying tourbillon. So if you hear the word flying tourbillon, what that means is there's no top bridge to the tourbillon. So if you look at maybe like my FP Journe tourbillon review or something, you'll see there's a big arm that's coming to the top and holding the tourbillon from the top. In this case, the tourbillon is only fixed from the bottom. And so from the top, it appears to be flying, right? So that tourbillon is what makes the difference between the Freak Diavolo and the original Freak. Not only is the whole movement basically a type of tourbillon in that it rotates once an hour, the Freak Diavolo has a 1 minute flying tourbillon as the escapement. So here you have the flying tourbillon, the minute hand. You can see there's a seconds track that omits from 15 to 45 seconds there, so half of it's gone just for aesthetics, otherwise it would cross here, but you get the point. And then this little plate here locks this. Now, why would you want to lock it? All right, the Freaks actually set the time, remember no crown, by turning the bezel, which turns the entire movement, okay? So the original ones didn't have any sort of locking plate, and if you just sort of hit the bezel or moved it in any way, all of a sudden your watch was off, right? In the new 28.8 version, they went to this locking plate, and they've had it ever since. So in order to set the time, you flip this up, all right, nice click, and now it's unlocked, and now we can set it forward or backward. So you can see we're turning the whole movement, minute hand, the hour hand is there, and it's turning with us. And there you can set it. So let's set it. It's actually 12:01 here right now. So let's just get it right. Why not? It's pretty cool setting it. So I like to do it anytime I get the chance. Although it's going to cover our minute hand, but whatever. All right, so now it's set. And you can see it's actually quite legible once you get used to the idea of the hour hand being down there. The minute hand is obviously incredibly legible, and most of the time you need to know the minutes anyway. You have a pretty good idea of the hour. So the last thing you can see is there's a huge amount of depth to this movement, even more so than the original Freak, in that you really get a sense of three-dimensionality with this cage that is the minute hand, and then the track. And of course, the minute hand is riding around this geared track on the outside. So you can see everything. I mean, this is the whole movement. All that you're not seeing is the mainspring, which is down on the back and delivering power up through and into the hand. So let's put it on the wrist, huh? It's 45 or maybe 45.5 millimeters, fairly big, but the strap and lugs are crafted so that the strap goes kind of straight down and the lugs curve down quickly. So it fits pretty well on almost any decent normal size wrist. I love, love, love this watch. I'm not a huge fan of Ulysse Nardin. They don't really have other pieces that interest me a ton, but the Freak has always been one of my favorite watches, and I think the Diavolo version is particularly successful in its execution. I love the coloring of this one. This is the white gold version with the black and red, which I think is super cool. And the idea of this 60-second tourbillon that is moving around the dial. You know, every time you look at your wrist, the whole tourbillon is visible and in another place, right? Is a really cool execution of a tourbillon and presents something new and interesting to the wearer. So I think this is an incredibly successful watch. If I were gonna look for any sort of watch that has like an independent vibe to it, but is from a real brand, this is definitely it. I mean, you couldn't have a museum of contemporary horology or something without including the Freak and Rolf Schneider, who this was his baby when he developed this company. So anyway, that is the Freak Diavolo, and that is one cool watch. Hope you enjoyed it.